So when it comes to choosing an area to live in South Florida, the options are endless. It's almost like, how do you choose one town over another when from the outside looking in, they all seem so similar? The truth is, each area has a vibe of its own and really unique features that draw people in for very specific reasons. So today we're going over the top 8 best areas to live in South Florida, not based on my opinion, not based on some random list, but based on where people are actually choosing to live and why. So make sure to stick around because by the end of this video, you'll have a much better idea of which area could be a perfect fit for you and maybe even a few that you can cross off your list. Let's get into the top 8 best areas to live. Why 8? Because it's my video and I said so. And this list is in no particular order, but it's based off where our clients chose to live this past year and exactly why they chose these areas. And it could be a lot to get through, so we're gonna move through this list pretty quickly, but as always, if you're planning a move to South Florida, whether you're buying or selling, and you wanna go more in depth on a certain area, we'd love to connect with you, hop on a Zoom call, and just kind of help you process everything. So without wasting any more time, let's kick it off with the heartbeat of Miami, AKA Brickell. And I recently just did a full video on this neighborhood, which actually did claim the #1 spot for best neighborhood to live in all of South Florida, per niche.com, but that's not why we're talking about it. The fact is, there is no other neighborhood like this in South Florida, and that's why our client Steve chose to move here. So Steve was from New York, but had been living in Hollywood for the past couple years, and coming from New York City, he had a hard time getting used to that lifestyle shift. Plus, Steve is young, he's in tech, he was already working in Brickell, and he's spending a lot of time there. So that commute was just killing him. Sometimes hitting 3 hours a day round trip, even though it's only 20 miles away. And to avoid all that traffic, sometimes he would just spend the whole day there. Even after he was done working, he would stay there late. And he just didn't really feel like he was getting his money's worth where he was living in Hollywood because he was never home. But like I said, Steve's main thing was the lifestyle change. In New York, he had everything he needed right there within walking distance, or if not within walking distance, he had enough public transportation to get him there quickly, and that's exactly what Brickell is. It's the heartbeat of Miami and the heartbeat of tech and finance. That urban lifestyle, luxury modern high-rises with amenities, walkability, shopping, dining, and nightlife all within 1 square mile. And it's just really ideal for anyone wanting that fast-paced environment. And what draws a lot of people here is just how easy it is to get around, and you can't find this anywhere else in South Florida. I don't care if you talk about downtown West Palm Beach or downtown Fort Lauderdale, it's not Brickell. And yes, both those areas do have some walkability, but it's the public transportation and just the amount of everything you need in such a small area that really separates it from the rest. You have the trains, the Metro Mover, and the buses at a really high level. You're also just east of I-95 and a short drive to the airport. So it's not hard to see why Brickell would take that top spot for the #1 neighborhood to live in South Florida. But at the same time, it's also not for everybody. Some people that come down here who are used to that fast-paced lifestyle, they want a complete change, and that's what brings us to our next area, the polar opposite of Brickell, which is Parkland. Now let's talk about Kunal. He's from Chicago, downtown Chicago, so he had already been living that fast-paced lifestyle, and when he started his home search in South Florida about 3 years ago, he started looking in Miami. But then things changed and evolved over time. He and his wife Andrea had a new baby on the way, and they started thinking a little bit more long-term, a little bit more about their future and their growing family. So when Kunal reached out to me last summer, he had a little bit more of a suburban approach in mind. His main concerns were finding an area that was community focused with top-rated schools and finding a large enough home for their future family where they could have a yard and have amenities to meet other families with kids, which was just a bonus on top of that. And as soon as he told me that, Parkland was the first place that came to mind. Now, I've also done a full video on Parkland, but to give you the short rundown, Parkland's a very suburban / rural town with a very exclusive feel. It's probably 90% gated communities, all with top-notch amenities and A-rated schools, so really great place for families. And something very unique about Parkland is that it's pretty much all residential. Aside from a few public shopping centers and just a handful of restaurants, the town is a majority of homes, parks, and just overall greenery, hence the name Parkland. It's also one of the few areas where you can still find new construction single-family home communities in this general area because they still have the space to build out there. Now, unlike Miami, Parkland is not the center of it all. I mean, as far as public transportation goes, you probably won't ever even really see a bus out there. It's actually located in the farthest northwest corner of Broward County, and it's definitely car dependent. You're definitely gonna want a car living in Parkland. But that's one of the things that makes it so special, is that you are tucked away from everything, but still have really good access via the Sawgrass Expressway to get to Fort Lauderdale and the beach in just about 30 to 45 minutes. Now, I know some of these areas may seem kind of foreign to you, and that's exactly why we just released our brand new relocation guide, which goes more in depth into these areas, plus 30+ pages of shopping, dining, cost of living, transportation, things to do, basically everything you need to start your relocation journey. That's a free download, and you can find the link for that in the description. Now let's head north of Parkland to an area I'm sure a lot of you know, which is Boca Raton, or Boca Raton, depending on who you are. I'm sure I'm gonna get flamed for that in the comments. But Boca's interesting because it's suburban, but it's also a city with a very boutique downtown area, but it's really known for its upscale lifestyle and really extravagant homes. And that's where Robert and Susan come in. Robert and Susan have been living in Fort Lauderdale since, I think, 1970, somewhere in the 1970s, and basically have been empty nesters for quite a while now. Both love to golf and have been members at Coral Ridge Country Club for some time now, and they would frequently visit the Boca Resort for little staycations, I guess you would call them. I think that's what it's called when you take a vacation in your hometown or your own area, basically. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Little vacations at the Boca Resort. But it just didn't make sense for them to stay in this large home when it was really just the two of them anymore. The caveat is that they wanted something new, something fresh, a new area, a new start, but they still wanted to be close to both their kids. So they didn't really want to leave the general area. They just wanted something new. And when it came to putting all these things together, Boca made the most sense for them. The option to keep that upscale style of living, but still be able to downsize while still being on the water, close to the beach, close to their kids, and most importantly, close to the golf course, made it an easy decision. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying that. And they love being close to Meisner Park, which is Boca's little boutique downtown area. Not too crazy, but just enough to keep them entertained. Not to mention, Boca's just beautiful all around. Something that really stands out about this town is just how clean and orderly it is. Almost like it was purposefully designed that way, which obviously it was. And in addition to Meisner Park, they're just a short distance to the Boca Town Center, which is actually one of the 3 largest malls in the entire state. As far as being close to their kids who live in the Fort Lauderdale area and then another one in northern Palm Beach County, Boca's a great central location to not only both those areas, but just overall to Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach via either I-95, the Turnpike, or the Brightline train. But there's so much more to Boca than what I just described, so I suggest you check these videos out, but let's head south a little bit now. I previously mentioned Coral Ridge Country Club, which takes us to our next area of Fort Lauderdale, but specifically the Coral Ridge neighborhood. Now, Coral Ridge is one of Fort Lauderdale's most popular neighborhoods for a number of reasons, but the main reason it drew Stephanie and John there was the boater-friendly atmosphere. It's got a ton of canals, the proximity to the beach and downtown Fort Lauderdale. So John and Stephanie reached out to me early last year, and they had to move quick because of a job transfer. And they were originally just gonna rent something for a year just to get in something quick. But then they thought about the fact that they would have to move twice within such a short period of time, even though their actual goal was to buy something. So they just opted to buy right off the bat, and time wasn't on our side. They also have 2 young children, so schools were very important. And John would frequently travel to Fort Lauderdale for his job, so he was pretty familiar with the general area. And aside from being on the water for his boat, which he didn't own at the time, but he did tell me he was gonna buy a boat once he moved down here, and he did not lie, he did buy a boat. But aside from being on the water, finding a home with character was also very important to them. They also wanted to be in an area that was really close to everything, but not right in the middle. And they really liked the style of Victoria Park, but it just wasn't gonna work out because Victoria Park is literally right in the middle. It's just outside of downtown Fort Lauderdale, and that's not what they were looking for. But Coral Ridge checked every box. It's located in such a prime area of East Fort Lauderdale, just east of US 1, with 3 points of access to 3 different beaches, 2 malls, and it's about a 15-minute drive from Las Olas and a 5 to 10-minute drive from Wilton Manors. But the fact that it's east of US 1 made it feel like they were in this quiet neighborhood, even though they were so close to everything on their want list. Coral Ridge also happens to be one of the older neighborhoods in Fort Lauderdale, so finding a home with character, it really isn't an issue there. I also mentioned that schools for their young children were really important, and Coral Ridge just happens to be zoned for Bayview Elementary, so it all kind of just worked out perfectly. Highland Beach is our next neighborhood, and this is an interesting place. Think like the Parkland of beach towns, and I'll explain what I mean by that. And I don't think I've ever spoken about Highland Beach before, because there's really not a huge turnover in a town like this, and honestly, it's kind of a hidden gem. And the reason that I say Highland Beach is like the Parkland of beach towns is because it's pretty much 100% residential. It's basically a strip on the Barrier Island, right in between Boca and Del Rey, only condos and houses. And this was perfect for our clients, Josh and Sylvia from Massachusetts. They had rented in Del Rey because they really liked Del Rey, but then they realized it just kind of became a little too hectic for them, but they still liked the idea of it. And they also really liked Boca, but they said Boca was a little bit too commercial. I don't know, that was their words. They basically wanted a small town Florida feel, but they wanted to be in this specific area. Highland Beach wasn't even on their radar until one day they took a scenic ride from the beach in Del Rey to the beach in Boca, and discovered this charming small town in between that they didn't even know existed. And one of the coolest things about Highland Beach is that it's one of the few places in South Florida with single family homes on the ocean. They also both work remotely, so commuting wasn't really an issue for them. But I'm gonna be doing a video on Highland Beach pretty soon actually, and these next 3 towns, so make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything. Now, when you think of the Miami metro area, you typically don't think of farms and horses and stables, but you do now because our next town is Southwest Ranches. And I have spoken about this a few times, I believe, and the main reason people move to this area is for land. Florida is known to have pretty small lot sizes, and I mean, it's all relative to the size of your home. You can be in a $10 million mansion in Fort Lauderdale, but your neighbor's house could still be right on top of you. And that's exactly what Amir didn't want. Amir reached out to me from North Jersey back when I first started this channel in early 2023. So it was a long process for him. He grew up in a town called Montclair that I'm very familiar with. And he told me that their house when they were growing up, it was on a 50 by 100 foot lot. So if you know how small that is, that's not a big lot at all. And he told me he would always drive through the parts of Montclair with his family when he was a little kid and just look at the nice houses that overlook New York City, or the really nice houses on really big pieces of land. So as a kid, he always wanted to own something like that. But living in New Jersey with the high property taxes, it just didn't make sense for him. Now, Southwest Ranches, to give you a little overview, is in Southwest Broward County, about 45 minutes from Fort Lauderdale and 45 minutes from Miami. And it tends to attract equestrian enthusiasts because of the much larger than average lot sizes and ranch style homes. But this isn't your average farm town because you're also gonna find some massive estates out here. There's also some really highly rated schools out here, so you couple that with really large yards and a laid-back atmosphere, and it just makes Southwest Ranches overall a great place for families. But it is kind of out there, and it's a really small town, but it's not dense at all. It has a population of about 7,000 something people, and I forgot how many square miles. I'll put it up on the screen, but it's about 500 or so people per square mile. And so this is a very car-dependent area, just like Parkland. But again, it does offer very easy access to Miami and Fort Lauderdale via I-75. Next up is Pompano Beach. It's been about 2 years since I made a video on Pompano, so I'm kind of long overdue on this. But we have Rob and Samantha, who were a young couple looking for their first home, and they were really drawn to Fort Lauderdale, but for what they wanted and the kind of area they wanted to be in, Fort Lauderdale was just a little bit out of their price range. Now you might be thinking, well, Pompano borders Fort Lauderdale. It's east, it has high-end waterfront homes. What's the difference? Pompano is going through a major redevelopment, and as it stands, much of the town is still fairly old. And it's one of those places that in the long term, it will be worth the investment. And that's ultimately what sold them on settling here. But overall, it's just a great place for anybody, whether you're a first-time buyer or not, who are drawn to Fort Lauderdale but don't necessarily want to pay Fort Lauderdale prices yet. Just like Fort Lauderdale, there's a lot of waterways and canals leading out to the ocean via the Hillsborough Inlet. They recently redid the pier and have plans to build out the downtown area, which has been in the works for I think like 20 years now, so in all reality, no one knows when it'll be done, but they also have a few designer condos going up, like the Ritz-Carlton, the Waldorf, and the W. So affordable housing out east, beachfront living, redeveloped pier and downtown area, with a mix of modern and new construction condos and single-family homes with a really laid-back atmosphere. You can't really beat it. And right in between Pompano and Boca, we have the small, tight-knit community of Lighthouse Point. And this is another interesting town because it's a town, but it feels like a neighborhood. But it's actually a town with its own police department and fire department. And that may not seem like a big deal. You might be thinking, well, obviously. Here's the thing. Not all towns or even big cities in South Florida have their own police department. Pompano Beach, prime example. They don't have a police department, they run off the Broward County Sheriffs. So here you have this town of only 2 square miles that feels more like a neighborhood and has its own police and fire department. And that's what drew Natasha and Dennis here. They were looking for more of a suburban atmosphere, but they still wanted to be close to water or on water and close to the ocean. And as far as suburban living in South Florida goes, all the suburbs are pretty much out west, except for Lighthouse Point. And I use the term suburb loosely because, again, it just feels like a neighborhood, part of a bigger town. Aside from the unique homes and canal front living, the one thing that stood out to Natasha especially, which was very unique, was the safety aspect. Now, I'm not talking about crime or anything safety-wise like that, but I'm talking about the police station and the fact that Lighthouse Point actually has cameras at every single entrance and exit of the town. So every car that comes into Lighthouse Point, their license plate is recorded. Same thing goes for every car that leaves Lighthouse Point. Their license plate is recorded. Some people might like that, some people might hate that. Natasha really loved that. Not to mention, they do get to live that suburban lifestyle out east with easy access to I-95, and they're only about 10 minutes from Boca and about 30 minutes from downtown Fort Lauderdale. So in total, there's 107 municipalities in South Florida, and I just gave you 8 of them, which means there's still so much to uncover. Maybe you resonated with some of these stories and some of these areas. Maybe you still need a little bit more info, and that's exactly where we come in. My team and I would love to be your real estate resource of choice, whether you're buying or selling anywhere in South Florida. We'd love to connect with you, hop on a Zoom call one-on-one, and just help you make sense of it all, and not only help you find which area could be the perfect fit for you, but also help you rule out the ones that you know aren't gonna work. So reach out to us at any time. We'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, I appreciate you watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.